That's for the sound. Hey, how's it going? We decided we'd sit down while we're cooking some dinner here after a work day and go over some of our favorite off-road moments from our travels over the years.
Yeah. How cool is it to think that we drove here?
So, not my favorite. Probably my least favorite.
This feels crazy. I know people think a lot of the stuff we do is crazy. This one feels crazy. I don't know what else to say besides it's crazy. I'm at a loss for words. So that is what this video is going to be. We're gonna cook some dinner and just share some memories with you.
So come along, grab a plate, grab a beverage
grab a
of
drink.
some sort, and yeah, enjoy.
Hey there, I'm Kelsey, that's Tim, and this is the story of our adventure. Life is fleeting, and we want to squeeze every bit out of it. We are wandering the world, so home is a bit of a moving target for us. We love finding the random, the remote, and sharing it all with you. So subscribe to get lost with us and hopefully find some inspiration to go after your own dreams.
All right. As you guys might know, this little barbecue is one of our favorite ways to cook dinner at night. It's just a lot of fun, and it's like this activity, and you get to eat slowly as you cook stuff.
Yeah, but I gotta say, at least once a week now that we're working, we love setting this up and doing it just because it's a fun thing to do, and all the food just tastes better from it. So
yeah, so I pre-prepared, since we're talking to you guys, all the food. It's all seasoned and ready to throw on the grill. That's why we have all those over there. We got some bacon, we got some halloumi cheese, we got peppers, onions, mushrooms, and steak.
Yep, and a steak coming up. We'll save the steak for a little bit here. We'll get some appetizers going of vegetables, you know.
I'll link the little barbecue below because it's actually been really good. We use it a ton, and it folds up really, really nice and small. So.
Yep.
But that's not the point of this video. I wrote down, we picked I think our top 5 off-road trail memories from the trip that were like the highlights, I guess. And the first one was in Peru, and it was kind of an accident. We called it Peruvian Mordor.
Yeah, so it's a great spot. We went to this town, and we were trying to take this back road.
Yes.
You know, in general, we were always hunting for lesser used trails.
Yeah.
And as we left this town, we had like some kids asking us where we're going. We're like, that way. And they kind of just looked at us strangely like, what do you mean that way?
No one goes that way.
Yeah, no one goes that way. And so I wasn't sure if that meant it's closed, it's washed out. I don't know. We just kind of went, well, I don't know if this is going to work. Then the road abruptly at the edge of this little town turned to grass.
We're like, oh. All right, well, we came out of the last little town to not much of a road anymore. It doesn't look like it gets very used at all. It's pretty much in some places just a grass flat spot.
Yeah, like we're making fresh tracks. Like I spun a tire a little bit on a hill. We're not in 4-wheel drive, we're just in 2-wheel drive, low range for the gearing. And it's so grassy and unlike traveled that the tire spun and created a little muddy spot. And I went, wait a minute. Like, we're the only car, like it's less than a car a day. If it's still grassy, we almost never see that. Like in the tire tracks, you're talking very few cars, because just like I did there, you spin a tire and that grass will die right there. So we're kind of shocked, and we hope the road goes through. But when you see a road that's got grass across the whole thing,
not a lot of use on this road.
Not a lot of use. So you just hope that it still makes it to where we're going. So
fingers crossed.
Yep.
So we start going up, and there's some switchbacks, and after a few, one of the switchbacks were tilting so much, and Goose didn't have sway bars. Even if he did, it would still be a bit sketchy.
Before we got up there, though, we saw, do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
So we saw these, we found out later, a type of chinchilla, but I've seen chinchillas, but I've never seen ones that looked like this. They literally looked like little rabbits with like really long tails.
Yeah, but it was like
a squirrel tail.
If you're picturing, before you Google it or before we put one on screen here, don't editor, don't put it on screen yet. Picture a rabbit, and then you take the tail of a squirrel and you staple it onto the butt of a rabbit.
Yeah.
That's what these were. And You know, I know the word chinchilla, I think I know what they are, but these were even a rare kind of chinchilla that isn't common anywhere else in the world. But we're cruising along and I just keep looking at these rabbits, but with squirrel tails.
Like, what in the world
We're
are
laughing
these
and just
things?
going, what the hell is this? How hilarious that we didn't do enough research to even know what these are. And it turned out they're pretty rare, but we're just laughing at ourselves going, look at us. Like here we are traveling and we are just blown away and we cannot stop laughing at these weird little rabbit squirrels.
Yeah, that was pretty funny, but we did go up and it started switchbacking and still no real signs of use.
Yep.
I think there was a little like
there was a single track that was
farm
there
that somebody either had like a little motorcycle dirt bike type
scooter
thing to get there, or they were walking in.
Yep.
And so we saw that. I think was it alpaca that they had there?
Yeah,
like an alpaca
I think so.
farm or I think
not
it was
a farm,
alpaca.
but you know,
like
you know,
they had 20 alpacas or
something like
maybe.
that. But as we're going up these switchbacks, we get to a tippy point that's a little too tippy. So we take our shovel out and we're like, you know, if this is the only reason people aren't taking this, then we might as well do it. And so we dug out the uphill side. We've done that a bunch of times over the years. And we got through it and we kept cruising along. And then we get up to this point where we saw this alpaca, this family. And it was like the parents and a kid living in a little hut in a valley. And they all came outside just to stare at this truck cruising along. And I just don't think they had seen anybody up there in a while, certainly not some gringos. And it was just interesting, you know, we're waving at them, they're waving at us, and they didn't approach, you know, they stayed at the place. And we noticed that at different times. Sometimes people are curious and run at you. Other times they're a little standoffish and a little worried, like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
And so we just kept cruising along and the road turned to mud. And it was like
once we reached the top of the mountain, and then it was like, okay, time to descend a little bit now.
Yep.
And it was it started that goopy, slippy mud where like I could get out and walk and your feet slip out from under you just because it's so slick.
Well, and the hard part too was the trail, like a lot of shelf roads for drainage or just natural erosion. The erosion comes from the hillside, fills up the sort of uphill side of a shelf road, hence what we dug out. And then the downhill side of the shelf road is less high. So the water sheds off, but also that's erosion.
That's where you tend to
So
slide
we're tilted out, and I'm just tilted slightly. And every time I slam on the brakes, every time I touch the brakes, the whole truck slides a little. And I go, man, this could be the end. You know, if we slide any further to the edge of this cliff and go off, we're so remote, there's nothing we can do at this point.
No.
Starlink didn't exist then. We had our inReach, but really if we crashed or got stuck, that family, we could walk back to their ranch.
So we're tilted slightly out on the sandy stuff before that we dug out. At least that had grip. And then when we stood on it, it didn't shake or move, so it wasn't so saturated. This stuff is just mud, soil. And so as I'm driving forward, I can feel the truck slightly sliding this way, so I'm trying to correct it. But if I do any throttle or brake, any heavy input, even steering input, it'll cause us to slide more. And really there's nothing to stop us going off the edge. So I'm just trying to drive in the slowest, most granny, delicate way I possibly can. Because once we start sliding that way, I can't stop it. There's absolutely nothing I can do. So not my favorite, probably my least favorite.
Yeah.
But it was just this tense couple of hours and we're going, man, we've really gotten in deep now.
And we don't know if it goes through, I mean, because it's still not showing any signs of use. Obviously, it is a road, but we're not sure what's on the other side. So will
a road anyway.
Will we come to a point where it's like, you know, we can't pass and we now have to figure out how to turn around and get up this muddy mountain on this side now? And you're like, oh, we've spent so much time getting here. I hope you're always crossing your fingers that there's a way to get through. And
but so once we got past all this, you know, I mean, it was still wondering if we're going to get through. There's no guarantee. We came around this corner and the view was just
incredible,
mind-blowing. It was Mordor. It was everything I wanted this adventure to be.
Yeah.
And so in one moment you finally see something that, you know, based on the condition of the road, most people aren't seeing. Even locals aren't getting up on this pass or whatever, not much anyways. And it just was everything I wanted the adventure to be. It was views that, because of our truck, because of willing to risk it, we were going to see things others may not. And I loved it. Once we kind of like got over the view of it, took a bunch of photos and stuff, and started heading down these switchbacks again, there was no guarantee we were going to get through. And finally we came to a gate that was open.
Yeah.
Old, beat up, and you
Yeah.
know, not a current gate, but it was open. And then we go down these switchbacks and we end up in like a current mine, and we're like looking at like work trucks, and they have the flags on them like a mine would. We're not in an open pit mine, but we're in an area where they're driving and they're going off on side roads now. And we're like, are we on private property? Are we in a mine? We never got into any sort of an open pit, but the whole way out until we finally got back to what was, we knew was a public road, there was no signs of anyone but company vehicles. And it was like, I think we did okay, and no one cared. Everyone was really nice, but it was definitely one of those passes that I just loved. But the whole time, until we hit that, teed into a road that I knew was legal to like, for the public to be on. And I think the pass was as well. It just wasn't driven, and it had fallen out of even people knowing it existed.
But it's such a, like it's so, the dynamic is interesting because you're on this road that is majestic and beautiful, yet there's also this sense of, is this dangerous? Are we going to get through?
Yep.
And it's just that mix of emotions of being so awed by the
is this the best thing or the dumbest thing we've done? We feel like that all the time. You hear us, we try and even say it while we're traveling in the videos, but like, is this the dumbest thing we've ever done? And we feel like that constantly. And I feel like if you're not at least occasionally wondering if what you're doing is maybe a little too far, then you're not really adventuring. You know, you want to occasionally feel that. Not all the time. It can get really tiring to always be pushing it. You don't want to hurt your...
You don't want to put yourself in like stupid situations. I'd say that one wasn't, I mean, we could turn around if it got bad, but we kept being like on the edge of it being bad, and it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't stupid, and it was totally worthwhile to do it.
Yep.
If you hand me that, I'll, the plate, I mean.
Yeah.
I can cut stuff.
Thank you, thank you. There's that.
My mouth is watering.
The cheese is a little burnt, but...
The bacon is always interesting on the grill because it likes to light up, but
flammable.
It's so good, and it's like the thick cut bacon too, so it's really yummy.
I think we're ready for all those. And then maybe even we'll try some of the mushrooms, see if they're ready to go yet.
All right,
okay,
so
what's the next one?
The next spot is in Guatemala and Nakum, the ruins of Nakum.
Yeah, Nakum, and then the unnamed ruins near it. So we were at Tikal, which everyone goes to Tikal. You can go there on a tour bus. It's totally worth it.
Cool.
You got to do it. If you camp within the border of the park, which you can do for very cheaply, you can get up and get into the ruins before they allow the first bus to enter. And for, I'd say 35 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that.
Yep.
We had the big pyramids in Tikal to ourselves. It was amazing.
It's so cool. There's no one else, at least that I can see, that's here. So we have it all to ourselves, this huge, huge area. And although we're walking on decks that were made, it's still really neat to be up here and see the view. Like, look at that. So cool. How cool is it to think that we drove here? I mean, not we walked to the temples, but we drove here. We're in Guatemala at Tikal. There's monkeys in the trees right there. So mind-blowing sometimes to stop and think we're really here.
Yes.
Then we went to Yasha, which is down the road. That's lesser visited, but still, you know, on a graded dirt road.
And what an experience sleeping. If you've never slept in the jungle with the howler monkeys at night, it's such a crazy I don't know. It's just unique because
Well,
at least for me, it's unique because
it feels like Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's such
like
a cool...
these monsters out in the trees that
Yeah.
are just screaming at night.
Totally.
So it's pretty crazy.
And then after Yasha, which is, again, that's like lesser visited, but still, you know, a Corolla could get there. If you look at Yasha, there's a road that goes north into the jungle. And if you're looking at your maps, you start seeing there's actually thousands of ruins up in that direction. There's hundreds probably that are on the map. And then there's 2 or 3 that are sort of well known. And Nakum is one of those. And so we decided, like, we're here. We'll probably never be here
And
again.
it wasn't
We gotta
raining
go.
too hard because
Yeah.
we were
It was
at
the rainy
start of
season.
the rainy season, I think.
And so we knew at any time it could really start raining and we'd be in trouble. But at the moment, everything was normal jungle muddy, and the truck goose is slipping around all over the place. So we just keep heading on this road kind of to the north, deeper into the Peten. And it was getting pretty rough where the ruts are, you know, a couple feet deep and you're sort of straddling several of them at once. There's no signs of anyone driving this recently, and we just kept pushing on. It definitely felt, even more than the mountain pass we did in Peru, this felt a
This
little
felt
crazier.
jungly, for sure. You know,
Jungly,
like very
but
jungly.
also I'd say just in our general, like, you know, should we be doing this? This felt crazier, but to me, this was one of those highlights of the trip,
Yes.
meaning I was willing to push it more here than in another place.
This
because
is where Tim got his first machete.
There, Tim.
Well, I just call this old, it's a good name. I haven't named him yet. I'll think of a name. This is old such and such. My 22.
Insert name here.
I got a 22.
Dos.
Mayday dos inchers. Don't know what inchers are because we're in the normal world. I don't know. It's 22 in American apparently. I don't know how many centimeters it is.
Yeah. So I've got my machete, and I'm walking in front of the truck, and I'm hitting, you know, all the overgrown bits out of the way, cutting our path through the jungle. Very much felt Indiana Jonesy.
Yeah.
After a few hours of driving, we actually come upon a couple of people. What was like 5 people hiking, and they were on their second day of backpacking to Nakum. And so we kind of said hi to them, and they said that they had seen a jaguar. I
Yep.
think. So they had been like stalked by a jaguar, and I was like, well, okay, do you want us to stay with you? And, you know, they were fine. They had a guide and everything and said, no, we'll see you in Nakum. So we continued on. And then we get to Nakum, and there's 2 caretakers who all their food comes in via helicopter. And they said, how'd you get here? How'd you get across the river with the caiman alligators?
We
So
were like, what river?
And they said, oh, you know, it should be full by now, but it's been a dry, wet season, so I guess it wasn't that full. We had crossed a little stream. I had no idea about alligators being in it because it was the thickest jungle.
Yeah, you feel like you're so far from like
Anything.
big water sources.
Yeah, and that you just don't picture them there for whatever reason. And so I picture them in like a Florida swamp, but this was thick, dark jungle. In the middle of the day, it's dark. And so we made it across that. We camped there for the night, hung out with the backpackers who came there, you know, and were camped out.
It was the worst mosquitoes I've ever seen in my life.
Ever.
Like even taking a picture was terrible because you'd stop for just a second and you'd just be covered in
Yeah.
mosquitoes. It was awful.
But I gotta say, it was totally worth it.
Oh, the ruins were absolutely amazing because they're untouched basically. I mean, obviously they're touched because they've dug them up or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But they haven't fix them up to look like what they think they looked like long ago.
And then that's where you really realize that in Tikal, if you Google the photos, we'll try and put one on the screen here, before Tikal was restored, you realize how much of what you're looking at is actually rebuilt by modern man, which is great. I'm sure they're doing it accurately, but it was so cool to be at Nakum and go, wow, this is what was discovered. With basically, they've cleared them a little bit. The two caretakers that live there make sure that nobody robs, digs in and robs any of the.
But they haven't rebuilt them and like replastered.
They've just cleared
things
some of the jungle.
The other thing that blew my mind that I just didn't comprehend, I guess, was when you're driving in these areas and anything that is a mountain next to you is a ruin. It is just, there's so much out there. It's crazy. It's not just like you're in open jungle. It's just, there's a city. So it is a huge city.
So around the time we were there, they had perfected this LiDAR radar. And so from airplanes, they were able to look through the jungle, and they realized that pretty much from coast to coast in that area of Central America is solid buildings. There isn't a break. It was that big of a civilization long before I think the Europeans got there, although that obviously a lot of people died from disease and fighting at that time. But prior to that was a bigger civilization, it looked like. So I'm not going to try and quote history here, because this is also, we were reading all this up at the time we were there.
It's been a while though.
But as we got done at Nakum, which was amazing, on the way back towards Yasha, I went, look, we saw a few side roads. We got to take one, because this road was this jungle mud, crazy adventure.
I've got to interject one thing, because we get to these ruins. They're like, how did you get here? You're supposed to have crossed a river. It proceeds to rain heavily the rest of the night. So all I could think about was, oh my goodness. Like,
we're thinking about Alligator River.
Now we're not going to be able to get out of here. What are we doing? And it was fine. But, it's just one of those things that plays on your mind where you're like, uh-oh, now it's raining a lot.
Well, and that happens so much when you're traveling. I mean, the amount of times we camped somewhere and then it rained all night, and the next morning to get out of camp, we winch for hours.
Yeah, that was
pretty
most of
common.
the times that we got stuck was because of that. Sorry.
Yep.
Ow.
Sorry.
So
the next morning, after all that rain, we're heading out, and I kind of think to myself, I know I've sort of pushed it a bit for Kelsey, and we've gone through this, and I said, look, we may have to winch foot by foot to get out of here. We kind of knew that going into it. So we knew we had taken on possibly the most amount of...
a big adventure.
Work we're going to have to take on. I knew we'd get Goose out of there one way or another, but it could be days of winching. So on the way out, there's this one turn. I was like, please, can we go at it for a little bit? She's like, we're here, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we turned down this one, and it was completely overgrown, so the truck is just driving through what looks like solid jungle. And it clears occasionally, and that's where what Kelsey was saying earlier is the hills on either side of us were just perfect. I mean, they were completely overgrown, completely jungle,
you're like
plants
on this
everywhere.
Roadway.
But it was like the pitch of the two hills on either side of us was consistent. And then we realized when we came along, and there's a hole in the mountain to our left, and there's a little bit of corrugated tin to kind of create a spot to get out of the rain, and a wood table that had been made. And then we parked the truck, walked over and looked inside, and it's a pyramid. And there's a hole bored into the side of this pyramid. And whether it was archaeologists or grave robbers, grave robbing is very, very common. They steal from all these massive amount of pyramids, and especially the undiscovered ones, because no one's watching them.
Yep.
And they traffic it north across the border, the dense border into Mexico, and then they can sell it internationally. So we're like, wow, we're here at a spot that may have been a grave robbed pyramid that's undiscovered. And so we checked out a few of those, and then we turned around and headed out. But at that moment, to me, to see pyramids that have no name, they're not on any map, they're still not on any map. If you look at the sort of discovered pyramids, I'm not saying we discovered them, because if our truck was able to get there, I know someone else has been there, whether it was grave robbers, archaeologists, whatever. But it's so amazing. To me, that checked every box about what I wanted this trip to be.
It was so like Indiana Jonesy. I mean, just the jungle alone lived up to what you wanted it to be, of vines and that are crazy. I don't know. I've never been in a true jungle like that before.
And nothing against the Amazon, because the Amazon's the one we all know by name. But the Petan is the thick jungle to me. I mean, the Amazon obviously is massive. So, depending on where we went, I can't compare all of the Amazon, right?
Yeah.
But all the places we went in the Amazon were thick and dense. The Petan was next level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for a kid from the desert in Arizona,
Yeah.
It was like, you
Mind-blowing.
can't walk 3 feet without not being able to see where you've just come from. So like getting lost and not being able to see any mountains or it's just dark and like
Or remember,
dense.
as we're cruising along, and then there's a spider monkey that likes us, and so he's following us. He doesn't come down, but he kind of sits there and looks at us. And I was up on top of a pyramid, and there's a spider monkey looking back at me from about, 30 yards away. And I'm like raising my hand, and after a minute he raises his hand, and it was just one of those weird, wonderful sort
And
of
we climbed
experiences.
to the top of one of the really tall pyramids, and I think it was in Yaksha. And you were eye level in this really tall tree with a mom and I think 2 teeny tiny baby monkeys. It may have been 1 or 2, but they were so tiny, and you're just eye level with their tree. So it felt like you were up in the trees with them. That was really, really neat too.
We're sitting on top of a Mayan ruin, watching a family of little monkeys with some teeny tiny little babies. We're up at the level of the treetops, so we are at the tip top of the tree. How cool is that? So cool. It really is such a surreal feeling sitting here. You feel like you're on top of the world. You can see for miles and miles and miles. And you're sitting on something that's so old. And you hear howler monkeys down below growling. And there's no one around. So cool.
Well, and just by the mannerisms, for me, it was that time that you more than ever before saw the similarity between us and monkeys and just went, wow, we can't speak, but it's very clear that we're so similar.
Yeah.
So, there you go. Less burn. I'm trying not to burn her cheese.
I don't know if you guys have ever had halloumi cheese. Super good on the grill, but these got slightly burned to the first batch. But
Yes. We're
this
doing
batch
better
is
now.
super
We're doing
yummy.
better. The next one is this mountain. We actually had finished this adventure we just were talking about.
Yeah.
We're
Only a
heading
couple
south
days
and we
later, I
are
think.
dead. We're
Yeah.
exhausted. We've been bit by a million mosquitoes. It's 90 degrees and 90% humidity.
So humid.
So you just smell yourself at this point, because we did a week up in the jungle, and we spent probably five or 6 days getting up there to the north, and then a few days exploring, and now we're heading back south, and we're just haggard at this point. Having fun, but we're exhausted. And a friend, says, hey, this guy invited me to go up this mountain, and it was somebody we actually met from Tucson who was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go along on this little adventure. The person that invited us, I won't throw them under the bus, but it was an American living in Guatemala, and thought they knew what they were doing.
I think we had met him once before, right?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, we had gone to the cenotes, sorry.
Yeah.
And so, but it was like, okay, let's go. We just enjoyed that adventure. This person can take us into another cool area. Let's go.
Yeah.
And so we get to this mountain, and the very first mud hill had been raining. Again, it's the rainy season. No one can get up it. Every truck has tried. Our friend Marcus has parked his Land Rover Defender in a parking spot at someone's little casita.
Just knowing that it wasn't a good idea to bring.
Yeah,
it up.
knowing he's not going to make it, and his truck just wasn't set up. Not that a Defender couldn't have made up that hill with skinny mud terrains, but with wider all-terrains and
Loaded
no
down with a
lockers.
rooftop tent and everything to live. Yeah.
Goose had the all-terrains as well, but he had lockers and more power and less weight and all that. So he parked his truck, and we were like, well, we'll go up. And then the guy who we were with, he brought 2 trucks and a bunch of guys to help. None of them could make it up the hill. And so we kind of just sent it. And in the intro video for a while, you see one where Goose's front end actually comes off the ground. It was so steep and we were under so much throttle, we laid max tracks down on the one side. And with it locked up, I knew instead of trying to spread them on both sides, we just got more distance out of them by putting them in a line. And so as we were getting grip, the front end kind of came up and we made it up that hill. And that was just the beginning. The rest of the next 12 hours was winching.
And this was actually a really dumb one, but we would not, us personally, we wouldn't have continued on.
Yeah.
But said person had sent the rest of his group up to the top where there was a cabin, which was where we were supposed to be making it to.
So there's this nice family who, actually we went to one of their birthday parties the night before, and they hiked ahead.
And they weren't off-roaders. They had no idea what was.
Yeah. And so they went ahead to these cabins up on top of the mountain, and we were carrying, not us, but the group was carrying all their clothing, food, everything.
Yeah.
And so
we didn't even give them the key to the cabin, so they couldn't go inside.
Yeah, that wasn't us. But so yeah, they didn't have a key. So they're up on this mountain ahead of us, but we were assuming we'd just drive right up with a little bit of effort. And so it's clear with all the rain, no one's making it anywhere. Only progress made is under winch. So we're winching and we're towing this other truck. The secondary truck of this guy that he brought was an FJ Cruiser, and he was full throttle sending it, trying to get up this one hill, and eventually it started to slide off the edge. And I said, look, the sun's already setting, just leave it. You know, we'll get it in the morning, but like, I can't babysit both your truck, your other truck, and get my truck up the mountain to these people waiting on us.
And he kept telling us that we'd winch him halfway up the mountain, and we're dragging ourselves and him up because we can't get up on just power without the winch alone because it's so slippery. And then he'd be like, I think I can make it. And we're like, if you unhook, we're not going to come back down to get you. So like, just stay hooked up.
So what Kelsey's talking about is, so after the FJ Cruiser was set aside, we're making progress under winch only, winching up this hill, and I'm towing his other truck, a Nissan Patrol, and he didn't have a winch. And so we're all Goose's winch got an amazing amount of abuse that day.
Yeah.
Did perfectly though. Kelsey, on the other hand, because it was a shelf road and tilted out and muddy, she said, you keep driving, I'll do all the rigging. So she would walk into the jungle, and everything in this jungle in Guatemala has spikes. And so she'd come out of it, everything ripped, and she's bleeding, there's bugs on her, and it's raining lightly. And so it's just, everything's wet, she's ripped up, and she's going into the jungle, into the darkness to find something to put a tree strap around and hook up the winch line. And so she's doing this again and again and again, well over 50 times, could be 80 times that night, she re-rigged the winch line. And we were towing this guy up the hill. So we get him up this hill, and then there's a flat spot for 20 feet, and then a bigger hill. And I just know, we've done this so long, I just know, you're not making it up that, I'm not making it up that, we're winching. Again, how close are these cabins? And he's certain they're pretty close. So I said, well, let's just keep winching. And he goes, no, I can make it. I said, well, the last hill, like Kelsey was referencing, we winched up the whole hill. So I forgot to mention this. We winched up the entire hill, re-rigging, 10 or 12 times up this hill. And then we heard him full sending it. The one truck is now slid off the edge, not crashed, but teetering. His second truck was ahead of it, made it a little higher, but is now stuck. And he says, come back and get me. And I said, well, okay, but
how much
that's why we wanted to have you hooked up to us in the first place.
Yeah.
I knew you wouldn't make it. So we reversed down this hill under winch, backwards. And all those hours of work, it was about 1.5 hours to 2 hours of work of Kelsey going into the jungle, is undone. And I pull up to his bumper, we hook him up, we do it all again. We get to the flat spot, and there's another hill. And I say, just stay attached with the last truck you have left. You're not going to make it. And he goes, I can make it. Like, okay, understand though.
Like, we came back for you once. We can't do this again.
I'm not going to ask her, who's at this point is full exhaustion, covered in bites, scratches, blood, tears. I'm not going to tell her that we're going to winch up this next hill for an hour, probably take an hour, just judging by how it looks, and then undo all that when you don't make it. So understand, you should stay attached, but if you insist on trying to make it on your own, you're on your own. And he goes, yeah, it's fine. And he had like paid assistants with him. So I said, okay. So
and
we
one of
winched.
them was super, super helpful. He was like doing whatever.
They were all really nice guys, actually.
Super,
we
super
became friends with them, actually. Out of this trip, we became friends with Marcus and his family, who owns Sonoran Rovers out of Tucson. And then we became friends with these helper guys who we couldn't find any way to keep in touch with. But so we winch up this hill, and then we get to the cabins, and then we get the families who are there, all of their food and cold, warm weather stuff. We set up our truck to camp, and then about 5 hours goes by, something like that, and he walks into camp, no truck, very angry, and his truck is off the edge. And so he asked, can we rescue it? And I said, yeah, tomorrow morning. And he's really angry. And I said, look, man, you should have just stayed attached. I don't
think you even rubbed it in. It was just like, yeah.
No,
we'll help you.
When he was upset, he was very upset. And I said, look, I understand if you're upset, but I hope it's not at me. I said, just stay attached. Your ego, you just wanted to do it. I didn't say all that. I didn't want to rub it in. But so in the morning, we woke up, we went down to where his truck was. On the way getting there, we're trying to get around these giant jungle trees, and the truck slides a little bit and crinkles Goose's door. So to this day, if you've seen photos of Goose, the new owner, the passenger back door is crinkled in, and we actually ripped the fender flare off too. We pounded it out later, and then these guys, again, that was Nicaragua.
Yep.
These guys helped us reattach the fender flare. It's never come loose ever again.
Nope.
So those guys were
They did
amazing.
a great job.
But yeah, so we crinkled his whole door in.
Which
Extra
is
insult to injury.
absolutely devastating to me because I had been kind of the one outside the truck winching and directing everything, and so to have that happen.
She took it as like her mistake. I mean, it wasn't. It just wasn't. But to think of all the gnarly stuff we had done to this point in the trip,
Yeah.
and have some little tiny slide crinkle the door
In a
and have
place
body
that we
damage.
wouldn't have chosen to,
Well, we're already babysitting someone else.
It was
late into the night.
very
past
emotional,
midnight.
guys.
It was tough.
for
It
me.
was a low point for sure. For
And you're
us.
exhausted. I was exhausted too. We were both exhausted, but I think, extra emotional because you're exhausted as
Yeah.
well.
Good morning. We made it up the mountain last night. It was very late and very hard. And then this morning, as we were leaving camp and I was spotting, I made a mistake.
Well, we slid. It wasn't a mistake necessarily. It was also we slid because it's very muddy.
And we got a big dent in Goose. And that really sucks. I'm really tired today. So I'm feeling very emotional about it, but
Yeah, I'm completely blocked up brakes right now. We're just cruising. So his truck's front end is off the trail and in the bushes. So we're heading down to rig up a offset winch, put a snatch ring into a tree, and see if we can pull his truck back onto the track. Once he's on, we'll continue down the mountain and we'll get to the FJ Cruiser and do whatever we got to do to get that one on the trail. And then I think we're just gonna sleep a lot. We've been going hard. Like we were in Tikal, we were in all these places, right? And we've just been working so much. I know it sounds silly working for vacation, but like working meaning like lots of driving and long days and not very good places to camp. So we just haven't been sleeping enough, and so many mosquitoes, just so many. They're giant, and you hit them and they fly away. Like they're impossible to kill. And I didn't sleep at all last night wondering about, you can show them what the truck, now we're at the truck. I didn't sleep at all last night because I knew I was going to need to figure something out to get him out of this. So I haven't slept in a few nights now. So just really tired. But we'll figure it out. Love you. All right.
So we go down to where his truck was. It's off into the jungle, off the shelf.
He wasn't even there.
No, he wasn't there. So I rigged up a pulley, one of the
He was supposed
recovery
to be
rings,
there.
up into a big tree, because obviously I can't pull him or it'll just pull Goose off the edge. So it's up into a big jungle tree, down to his Nissan Patrol. And then we put the whole truck under load and tension, and we've got Goose's front end actually off the ground. There was so much load. And then when he did arrive finally, he got in it, put it in reverse, and was full throttling it. And I said, no, you're making it worse. Just let it crawl in reverse. And then with Goose's front end off the ground, pulling on the winch, we were able to get him back on the trail. Then we get to his FJ Cruiser, which has one tire off the shelf road. And he wants to do all this different stuff. And in the end, I told the guys who were working with him in my broken Spanish, don't listen to him, stop listening to him. And they kind of nodded. They, at this point, knew, like, okay, we shouldn't. And I said, we're going to push on the back of his truck while he puts it in drive forward, low range forward. So the tires will spin. that'll create enough slick loss of traction that we'll be able to just push it back into the ruts. And sure enough, put it in drive, the tires were slowly moving. We pushed, it flopped back into the ruts, and then we built a trail of max tracks so he wouldn't slide off again backwards, and he just backed down the hill. And once we got to sort of the easy point where we all knew we could make it out of there, we said, okay, thanks, we'll see you later. And we just left, and it was the anger and frustration I felt for getting into that situation and having to take care of so many different people. And then these people who, no fault of their own, but we had to make it to them. We ended up denting our truck, which, as you know, we both love Goose, and we still do. And he's like a part of the family.
Just the amount of wear and tear on the truck, all of our gear, ourselves, like it was.
And have somebody who, in the end, after saving 2 of their trucks,
didn't even say thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad you guys got to see this hill. And I went, cool. Like, no thanks whatsoever was given to us from him. All the other guys who were his helpers were amazing. And we just kind of went.
I will tell you that was one of the hardest videos that I've had to edit because I had to try to remain friendly.
Yeah, so in that video, if you saw it, we never did say anything negative. If you got the gist of what happened, great. But we're not somebody who's going to make a video hating on someone. But let it be known it was a frustrating day.
Yes.
And as soon as we were done with that, we kind of went, all right, like never again can we let ourselves get sucked into something. We just say no. We just say no and turn around and you know, it wasn't our fault that people were on the hill. I don't know. We probably still would have gone up. They were nice folks. We were literally at their birthday party the night before, and they were just wonderful.
It was just a hard situation to be in.
Yeah.
You know.
But I would say after that, we've always off-roaded alone primarily or with a couple friends. It was tough after that to off-road with some friends on the road.
Yeah, trusting people like him. He kind of ruined it.
Well, I think from that on, we really trusted our gut. If there was any hesitancy on a person or a group of people, we listened to it.
Yes, but it was a great story, and
I'm
actually glad that we went and we met some really nice people.
Yeah, it was a good adventure.
I'm gonna let Tim eat some of this because I'm hogging all of it.
So, one of our favorite places of all the travels is the Altiplano of Argentina.
Yes.
If you look on a map, find the town of Salta, and then type in Mina La Casualidad, and it's off in the middle of nowhere between Argentina and Chile, high up in the mountains there. And the last town from Salta you hit is something Cobre, I can't remember the name.
Yeah, I'll put it on the screen. I can't remember what it is right now.
At the time, again, I'm sorry if my history's bad. At the time, when we looked it up after the fact, not when we were heading there, it's one of the only documented instances of people, humans, Homo sapiens, evolving in our current times. The people there can withstand a level of arsenic that would kill most people.
In the water, yeah.
In the water. And it just naturally occurs there. So obviously a lot of people probably died over the years.
We found that out after we were there.
After we were there, and we didn't fill our water tank because it was full, but man, oops if we did.
Yeah.
But it's just super interesting. You're very high in the mountains. These towns exist for mining and mining only, generally.
Yeah.
And so there are copper mines and there's gold mines and what was it? The other one, there was sulfur.
Yep.
And so we filled up the tank and the auxiliary tank and the jerry cans for Goose there, and we left.
So that was the last fuel, I think.
That was the last fuel, and then we headed out. And after maybe 150 miles of off-roading, you pass your last little town that doesn't have fuel, but it's a village.
Yeah.
And now you're just out in the middle of nowhere, and you're following what is an old railroad grade. And
you're basically on salt flats. Like, you're on the edge of salt flats most of the time until you get up into the mountains, which is like, I think it's literally the border of Chile and Peru. Right there is where this mine is. It sits, and I think some of it actually is on the in Chile, but we were on the
Argentinian side mostly.
Argentina. I said Peru, I think.
It's actually not as cold as I would have thought. Okay, again, the things you find are out on the salt flat. Look at that little like pond. It's so blue, salty. It's actually pretty deep. It's crazy beautiful.
But you get to this town, it's massive. There's, it's completely abandoned, but there's like a 50s diner.
It's really creepy driving
really
into
creepy.
that town because you just feel like something's watching you.
Yep.
Like there's no way that this is just empty. So you like drive in and it just gave me this really creepy feeling. It's super windy up there too. So like everything is making noise. You have noise coming from everywhere, things clanging,
Yep.
just the wind like whistling through stuff. It's really
Yeah, I mean, at
pretty
its
creepy.
peak, there was this many thousands of people that lived there. I can't remember, but it was quite big. And there's a tramway that leads the ore from the mine up the mountain down to
And
the
you hit
city.
pavement. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So after doing, I don't know how many miles, lots of miles off-road in these dirt roads and salt flats and stuff, and you get up to the mountain and suddenly it's paved because basically from the mine to the railway station, I guess, they had this road paved so big trucks could take it and that sort of thing. But it's really weird to suddenly get to these like fairly nice paved roads. It's like a single lane, but it's
Take one out, too.
kind of unnerving. It's actually kind of creepy, the wind, and there's so much metal to make noises. It's kind of a creepy place. I don't think I want to spend a night here. But man, sure is cool to look at. And it's not actually as cold as I thought it would because we're pretty high. We're at 13 or 14,000 feet. So, pretty cool.
It's just so
And
amazing.
we did actually find 2 living things there. 2 little dogs were left
Yeah.
there. So we gave them, I think we had a loaf of bread and we were like, well, we'll just give these dogs bread because
yeah.
they were super, one was really, really old and then the other one was very friendly
Yep.
and sweet, but they were seemingly there all by themselves.
Yep.
And I think a year or so later, someone sent
Yeah.
us pictures and said they're still there, or one had died.
One had died. So
Yeah.
one had died. They lived in what was the church.
Yeah.
And so these 2 dogs lived kind of at the entrance and inside what was the church. And then someone who had watched our videos went there and said that one of the dogs had mummified. It had passed away and was like a mummy, and the other one still would sleep there next to it. So kind of sweet
sad.
though that people, all the people visiting have kept the dogs alive. The
Yeah.
one that was not so old anyways.
Yeah.
And another thing too that we can put on the screen here too is this train station we stopped at along the way was amazing. So you're cruising along and you see a railroad grade.
Yeah, there were
And
rail
so we did some
cars, too.
switchbacks up to this railway station, and there's some old railroad cars still sitting there. There's the whole office. You go into the office, and there are thousands of sheets of paper, invoices for the loads of ore that they were taking out of here. There's letters to some of the miners. I mean, it's really creepy. All just left there. The wind's blowing them around. There's the mechanic shop that's filled with nuts and bolts and old rusty tools.
The plumbing is still some of it,
Yeah.
like it must be a natural spring and some
Yeah,
of
yeah.
it's still like spurting out.
You go into the restroom, the men's restroom is just one of the urinals is spraying water out because it's pressurized by a natural spring on the mountain and it's, blown out finally and it's spraying water. But yeah, it's just, to me, it was again one of these sort of things that I thought could happen in the trip, not literally this, but something like this where you're somewhere that most people don't go, where that auxiliary tank you built, all that effort you put in is now worth it. Like when you're exploring the American West, rarely do you feel like, gosh, I'm so glad I have all this survival equipment.
Yeah.
Not that you can't find those remote places on foot especially, but for our truck, it was like the way we had built Goose and the skill set that we had was so perfectly suited for all these scenarios we're
Yes.
talking about.
Although I will say the wind There was
Oh,
nowhere to
man.
hide from
Brutal.
the wind, and the wind was insane.
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time we ended up sleeping without popping the top, because you literally could not, like, you could barely open your door,
Yeah.
let alone try and pop the top of Goose. So
It was the first time we truly regretted. There have been a few others, but this was the first time we truly regretted not building a downstairs bed.
yeah, because it never died. Usually we could wait, you know, till later in the night and the wind would kind of die down and we'd be like, okay, now we can crawl up into bed.
Yep.
But this was just intense wind all
Yep.
the time, forever.
Yep.
And
the kind that would rip the top off. I mean, it would break the hinge
Yeah.
and rip the top of the truck off.
And so we just decided, oh, it's like an airplane. How bad can that be? I think you were in the back, and I just figured, I'll sleep in the seat. I've slept on planes. Like, how bad can it be? It was a miserable night.
It was brutal. Yeah, I was slept on top of our clothing bags and some other stuff, and it was like, this is not working that well. But again, it was just such a great adventure, I think,
absolutely.
though, that I hope stuff like that, if you do a trip, you find, and you push it when it's an area people say don't go, or it's not safe, or it's too remote.
It's risky because it's remote. There was I forget what desert it was called again. Put it on the screen. But remember the desert? It was super red rocks,
Yep.
and it was gorgeous. It was so pretty.
Yeah.
And you're driving through this canyon, and these big red cliffs are next to you. It was so, so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool.
Yeah. No, absolutely beautiful. So I don't know. It was definitely one of our highlights of the South America leg of the trip.
Yeah, that was really unique. That one truly felt remote. Real remote. All right. You ready? This may not have been the smartest decision to film a video while we're trying to eat dinner.
You enjoy watching us chew, right?
Okay. The next one is Mount Uturunco. Has a
This
cool
one,
name.
yeah. This is one of those ones that maybe in terms of like danger is definitely on the higher end because of what the elevation does to your body. So
This one is in Bolivia, by the way.
yeah, so we're in Bolivia. We're traveling with Tim and Shannon, who have that beautiful Range Rover Classic. Mm-hmm. And we had tried to head south. We had done the Lagunas route, and that was fine. It was very touristy and a lot of people, a lot of trucks and stuff like that, but beautiful. And we'd found a hot springs that I think is now a pay hot springs, but at the time it was still natural.
Yeah, I think they were working on making it a location at that point.
But then there was, like there are in a lot of these countries, there were some protests going on. So there's roadblocks, the gas stations were shut down. Mm-hmm. We had to go way out of our way to get fuel. And we ended up going over the mountain, sort of through the mine in the mountains, where Butch Cassidy and Sundance supposedly were killed. All the research we've done, I don't think they were ever there, but that's where they were supposedly killed, up in this silver mine up in the mountains of Bolivia.
Yeah.
And we even had a local come and very, very suspiciously ask us who we were and what we were doing there, because people go up into those mountains trying to steal from the mine. So they're all very protective of, you know, who are you, what are you doing here? So we finally get to this other town, we get fuel, and we're passing Mount Uturunco, which I had researched is the highest you can drive in a 4x4 on Earth. Now in India, there are two passes that are paved, that one they've created since, but both of them are paved.
This one is the highest and on dirt.
This is the highest off-roading you can do on Earth without going off-road, like the Unimogs in Chile went up the side of a mountain with special permits, and got a little higher by winching and stuff. But I was like, we got to go up this mountain. This looks too cool not to check out. And we've now been to like 16,000 feet in elevation, and we've done some hikes, etc. I got to go check this out because I want to see how my body does at this elevation, and who doesn't want to try for like the highest they could do? So we start getting to the bottom of this mountain. There's this massive old sulfur mine.
Oh, that was one of the creepiest places I think I've ever been.
Yeah, so it was clear that somebody had been living at this former sulfur mine. It was
Killing
crazy.
alpacas.
And there was, dead alpaca carcasses piled up where the person had been eating them. But this clearly had taken place long after the mine had shut down. This was more recently, in the last 10 years. Somebody had been living there, living off of alpacas. And so it was kind of just an eerie, spooky place. Again, kind of like Mina La Casualidad, but there was no city. Mm-hmm. Some of the old mining equipment would randomly turn in the wind, and you would just kind of go, yeah, this is interesting.
And you're like, oh, what's that?
And then, you were basically looking up at the side of Uturunco, which is the source of the sulfur. So the reason this road even exists is at some point the road was nice enough to take trucks up, and bring the sulfur down and process it at this this mine or whatever. And so, or mill, I don't know what you'd call it.
Yeah.
So we start going up this mountain at about 14,000 feet. We notice our friends in their Range Rover are smoking pretty bad. It's a diesel. And then at like 16,000, 15,000 feet, somewhere around there, they had turned around and headed back down. But we were far enough up that like, you're not going to turn around and just ask them. You know, they clearly weren't in any medical issue. They parked for a while and they
we didn't want to
down.
waste any fuel because we
No,
needed all
we're
of it
so
we could
remote
get.
at this point.
And that was one of the reasons they decided too. They didn't want to push it with their fuel range, I think.
And so we just keep going up these switchbacks, and next thing you know, 17, 18,000. I mean, numbers that just boggle the mind. Both of us, you don't feel very right in the head. You know, you're just not thinking clearly at that elevation. We haven't acclimatized to it at all.
No.
And so we're just, boom, we're up there. We're drinking a ton of water because any time in the trip thus far when we've hit 15,000, 16,000 feet that we felt sick, it's usually we tied to somewhat, even lightly being dehydrated. Yeah. We're taking electrolyte tablets, chugging a ton of water, and we're still feeling pretty out of it. So we have these coca candies, which are pretty common in Bolivia, and they do have the coca leaf in it. If you're relating it to something like cocaine, it's like 1/1,000,000th of the strength, right? So it's very mild.
It's kind of like coffee, like a harsher version of coffee.
Yeah. So we get up to the point where there's some big corrugations isn't the right word, undulations or whatever.
Yeah.
And all the tire tracks stop. It's a somewhat flat area. I know that there are some groups that lead tours up this mountain. And so we parked there for a second and kind of chat and go, you know, I think we walked around the corner too and went, look, the trail looks okay. I get that they stopped here. We probably should assume that the locals know what they're doing if they're stopping here. But I also know that, you know, most people in all the countries we've been in thus far, they don't really off-road like we off-road. So given our skills and Goose being so capable, we probably can go further. So we sort of rationalized our reasoning for going past where the tracks ended. I'm going to get rid of these off of here.
Fire!
Let that fire calm down for a minute. Main problem with cooking bacon, too much flames. So we decide we're going to go past it. And we both kind of, all these decisions we always make together because I don't want to push her when it's this serious. To say, hey, let's go a little deeper in the jungle, I might say, please, you know, do you want to? And if she says yes, we go. But like on one like this, it's like, I'm not pushing at all. We could go further, I think. I walked around the corner, you did too. It looks okay, but we don't have to. We're not trying to win anything here. And we both went, okay, we're here. We're this deep into the middle of Bolivia, far from cities, at 18,300 feet or whatever it is. I mean, we're here. Let's do it. So we get going, and I realize first gear, low range, at that elevation has so little power, I can barely get Goose going. So there was like a rock under one of his tires, and I had to roll back and then hit it with a little speed just to make Goose move in low range first gear. And we were re-geared as well.
And as you can imagine, just like walking is like an effort on your lungs and your body and everything like that. And it was so windy and so cold that once you got out of the truck, it was just like, you know, that like when you jump in really cold water, how it like just takes your breath away and like you can't really breathe because you're just being like flooded with this freezing cold air. Yeah, it was.
And it had taken us hours to get up there. So we knew if the truck were to die or fail, to get even just to our friends Tim and Shannon would take the whole night. And at that elevation, you'd probably just freeze to death. So it was like, okay, this is pretty serious. We went around the corner. We kept going up a few more switchbacks. And then we get to a point where the road, the shelf road, like a lot of the ones we've mentioned, you know, the erosion had caused the uphill side to be higher than the downhill side. So it's kind of washed out. And, you know, if I were, you know, an hour from my house,
weren't as high as they
and
were
I had
there,
my friends with me, I may have tried it. Or I may have tried putting a ratchet strap around the uphill side of the axle to the frame.
We probably could have gone further.
It couldn't lean as much or whatever. I would have tried to rig something like I've done in a rock crawly type situation. But we look at it and we're just going, this is dumb. This is when it feels dumb. If we continue, we're pushing it to try and do something. For what reason? I don't know, right? To say we got another 50 feet or 100 feet higher. And so we realized right then, call it. So we took some photos of the truck, of ourselves, of our in reach of the elevation we had hit, just under 19,000 feet. And it was amazing. And it was super exciting, but we're all alone. Our friends are long gone, no longer in sight. But we're talking a big mountain. So, I mean, even where they turned around, they were like a little tiny speck.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, we've pushed it. This is enough.
18,661, 18,660, something right about there. Old Goose is doing good.
Don't jog. Head above 18,000 feet. It's hard to catch your breath again. This feels crazy. I know people think a lot of the stuff we do is crazy. This one feels crazy. I don't know what else to say besides it's crazy. I'm at a loss for words.
The problem was the width of the road was only a little bit longer than Goose's wide, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a genuine, I don't know what we called it in the time, but a genuine 35, 40 point turn. So we started and we just started doing this, and you're not feeling right in the head. And you know, if your foot slips off the brake when you go to the edge, you're dead. I mean, you're
It
just
is all concentration.
thousands of feet of drop on the edge. And then you'd back up, and literally I would slowly back up until our spare tire, which was on a swing out, would touch the rock face lightly. And then, you know, she'd walk to the front of the truck and direct me forward. And then I'd get to the edge and I'd stop and I'd go back and it would touch. And we just kept doing this again and again and again
Like
and again and
Austin
again
Powers.
until we're facing downhill. And then I thought, kind of like when you're backpacking, the descent is actually where most of the injuries happen. So that was racing through my head, and we're both going, okay, remember, just because we made it up, we've turned around, still our brakes could go out. I've had Goose's brakes go out actually before, years and years before, but they overheated. So I learned my lesson in definitely using the engine braking a lot on an 80 series because they don't have massive brakes. And Goose is, of course, very heavy at this point in travel mode. So we put it in first gear, low range, and we just crawled down and we took our time. And it was just one of those things that when we got to that camp that night, I was like, I cannot believe we drove our truck to like 19,000 feet. And part of me always is like, well, if we'd pushed past that one sketchy spot, we could have gotten to 20,000. But
And we probably
also,
could have,
who cares?
Like, yeah, why, was
whatever,
it worth it? No.
So it was awesome, and it was like one of those adventures that felt like some big deal to us anyways.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's crazy to think about. Like, I still think about it, and I have all those memories, and like, we actually did that. But even telling the story, you're like, we did that? Like,
Yeah,
that was
totally.
us?
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty crazy. Cool memory.
Yeah. So that was a neat one for sure. I mean, that was just such a neat area. And the country's in upheaval too. I think that added to the sketchy feelings of it too, is
You
know
didn't
that
know if you were close to needing fuel, you didn't know where you were going to be able to get that or get through to the next town.
and you didn't know if like the protests were going to erupt into something more. They didn't, and they normally don't. And when we did go to a roadblock, they were so kind. They said, hey, we can't let you through because we can't.
Yeah.
But do you have enough food and water? Could we cook you something? And it was like, no, we're good. But okay, I don't feel so scared. It's not like we're protesting and
we're
lighting
not what
cars
they're
on fire. We're
protesting
protesting
against,
because this is the only way the government listens to us, is when we stop commerce, we stop the semis, we stop the tourists. All of a sudden, then people listen.
Yeah.
So I understood, but it was a sketchy feeling in the country at the time, at least for us.
Yeah.
Pretty regular, normal, I think, for Bolivians to
Yeah.
have these protests. But for us, it was like that added to being on the top of a mountain going, would emergency services, do they exist? And if they exist, you know, are they wrapped up in something going on?
Yeah.
So it just added to the sketchy feeling of that adventure, I think.
Yeah, it really did. All right, last but certainly not least, because this is actually one of my favorites, I think. I don't know, it's hard to tell. They're all favorites, but is in Brazil, the Transpantaneira highway. And
So it's da-da-da-da kilometers and da-da-da-da bridges. I'll put it on the screen. But there's almost as many bridges, old wooden bridges, as there are kilometers.
And when we went, they were starting to work on building like better bridges, but it was still all the old crazy bridges.
Which is kind of cool. I'm really glad. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously the old wood bridges, as you went across them, the truck would slide to the side because they were all tilted and sort of
they'd move
different
with you.
states of falling.
It's crazy.
They were wood, so when it was muddy, you're just sliding all over the top of them. There are alligators in the water. They're caiman in the water next to you.
So as we headed out, it was dry and not raining. So it was, besides the like very sketchy bridges, which no matter what the weather is, they're very sketchy, but the road was dry.
And then, by the way, when we were in there, the reason we did this road is you get in a little ponga with a local, and they take you up all these little tributaries. And we saw river otters demolishing a snake that they had caught and were eating it and just ripping it to pieces.
Yeah.
We saw
Tons
an
of
alligator, or
crocodiles.
was it crocodiles or alligators?
Crocodiles, I think.
So we saw a crocodile try and eat the river otters, and they swam underwater and bit its tail and like pissed it
And
off.
we were like 10 feet from them. It was
Yeah, we're
in
just
this
right there.
little boat that you're like,
a
oh.
little ponga thing.
Yeah.
We kept looking for jaguars. That's sort of the thing to see. We missed them, unfortunately, but the whole experience was crazy. The amount of animals
Tons
we
of
saw,
capybara, like
crazy vampire
cranes.
fish and stuff,
Yeah.
like big teeth.
What are the other little piranhas?
Yeah.
Ugh. It was
So-
like, don't touch the water. It was
But it was
everything in there
literally a
was so
Nat
scary.
Geo thing. So
Yeah.
if you get a chance to go that part of Brazil,
It was amazing.
the Transpantaneira now is going to have some cement bridges. It's not going to seem as exotic.
Yeah.
But if you can get on a ponga in that little river, that is not changing.
That's
is
so cool.
That is probably going to be the same for a long time.
Yeah.
And so we're down there, and then that night it dumps and it dumps and dumps and rains and rains and rains.
We're like,
And so I'm going, man,
what are we
I don't think
doing?
it's going to be good.
Yeah.
Because I was remembering how
'Cause you
silty.
know what you came out too. All the bridges, all the
and
it
it's
was
talcum powder. And so just like here, when talcum powder gets wet, it turns into some of the worst mud.
slime.
So we're heading back out, and it's bad. We're flinging mud everywhere. The road's built up a little bit, and so you're driving along sort of a built-up, crowned road. But if you get off that crown at all, like when another truck is coming your way, you have to move out of the way a little. And we found that in Goose, as soon as we got off to the side, all four tires, we were messing around. We let the air pressure down, put the air pressure up. We had them fully locked, triple locked, unlocked, just trying to get off of that crown. And he'd just walk along like this, constantly getting closer and closer to the water. And as long as you're in the center of the road and don't do anything stupid, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
But then some of these bridges, when they're muddy, cars can literally slide off the top. So we came upon a car that was off in one of the bypasses of the bridge. And so they're stuck in the mud, and it turns out it's a guide and a couple from Colorado Springs.
Yeah, I think so.
And
Either Denver or Colorado Springs. I can't
yeah,
remember
and they're
now.
older, and they're just like, what are we in
Like,
right
oh,
now? Like
God,
they
yeah.
were a bit freaked out. So we hop out. They didn't expect a bunch of Americans in two trucks to hop out. Put Max Tracks under the tires of the Corolla, but they kept, whiskey throttling
I think it
it.
was a
So I said,
manual,
can I
right?
drive? Yeah, it was manual.
Yeah.
So I got up on top of the Max Tracks, and once we got going, I knew not to stop because then we're just going to have more work. So I just kept it floored, and this lady, this retirement age lady is sitting next to me just like, what is happening? Full throttle around the bypass, through the mud, through the river, back up onto the road, and then got him nice and straight in the center of the crowned road and, put it in park. Went back, dug our Max Tracks out of the mud.
And I think at that point, both of us were covered in mud because we had already, been getting ourselves unstuck because basically, like the tour vans that come out there,
They stay in the center of the road.
Because if they go off,
Yeah,
to
and
be
they're
fair,
right to actually.
yeah.
As frustrating as it is, you have to move because they have no chance.
Yeah.
So they stay in the very dead center crown of the road. And so I just went off the edge, and that's what I was talking about earlier, where you start crab walking sideways. And then we did Max Tracks. We tried everything to get ourselves back up. And eventually we did, but it was like every wheel rotation, you got a little closer to the water, and you can see the crocodiles hanging out
waiting
in the
for
water
you.
watching this melee happen. And so it was just surreal. It definitely was something out of a movie. And if you've ever needed that incentive to like take the time, do the right recovery, some man-eating crocodiles in the
Don't
water
wanna end up
is a
over
good
there.
incentive.
Yeah.
And so I just love in this trip how much everything was necessary and real, instead of it being, nah, I'm fine. I'll worry about it later. It's like, no, let's do it right. So we got the Max Tracks under the tires, got back to the crown of the road. And it was just constant. Every bridge we went over, one truck would wait, the other would cross. And because you never knew what was going to happen. And halfway across, the bridge is tilting. And so the whole truck slides over, and there was little pieces of wood nailed down on the edge. And our big tires in Goose,
You just hope, yeah.
you just weren't sure because they're so mushy-gushy in a good way a lot of the time. But in that scenario, in a bad way, where I wasn't sure if they were just going to hit that little protector piece of wood and either blow it out, blow the nails out of it, or just go slop right over the top of it
10
like
feet
it was
down
a rock.
into the swamp. Yeah.
10 feet down, upside down into the swamp. And so
Ugh.
that was a time I was so glad to have someone traveling with us, because if they had issues or if we did, we'd figure it out. And probably the only electrical issue Goose has ever had is the fuse that runs the gauge cluster, just the gauge, had failed, right? Had blown. And so everything else on the dash went dead, but the fuel gauge seemed to be working. But it wasn't actually.
The windows stopped working. Do you remember that?
Yeah, oh, you're right. That was tied to the gauge cluster. So we have the windows cracked down in the worst mud pit ever. So
And
we
it's
got
raining, of
trash
course.
bags over those. And then as we're driving along, the gas gauge every 20 minutes goes lower. And I go, we must have a leak. And so that's just how apparently, instead of when you shut the truck off and the gas gauge goes down, when the fuse blows, it just slowly over about an hour and a half crept down.
And we're like, oh no, we definitely don't have enough fuel.
We're not going to make it.
Fuel,
and then, of course, finally, we get through most of the bad part of the road. Because I wanted to do this. The reason we're not hunting down the electrical issue is it's raining and it's getting worse and worse and worse. So finally, we get to where the road's a bit better. The rain seems to be diminishing. And I was like, okay, cool. They had stuff on their truck they were messing with. So I thought, hey, this is the perfect time. Look through the fuses. One's blown. Put in the new fuse. Boom, the gas gauge goes up, the windows work, and it was like...
It was so muddy. Do you remember one of the rental cars, I think he was trying to go out?
Yeah.
And we were like, this isn't a good idea. And it was so muddy...
French guy.
...that his
in a rental car.
Rear wheels were just stuck. Like they had gummed up with so much mud in the wheel wells that they were just stuck. And essentially he was just like on a slippery...
Amazing guy. Like
yeah, he was super cool.
To me, from the French people we've met traveling, the most stereotypically French guy, and if you... are thinking of the normal stereotypes, that's not what I mean. Meaning he was heading out, he'd gone out and done a tour, and he's trying to leave. He's in a rental car. The rear tires, as Kelsey said, are completely locked up. We'd spend 10 or 15 minutes clearing them. They'd do one rotation, maybe two, pack in with mud and lock up again, like you had the emergency brake on. And so he's not going anywhere. We're making like 20 yards of progress with him. We offer him a ride in our trucks, hop in, we'll get you somewhere safe. And he goes, nah, it's no big deal. I'm good. I'm like, your truck in the middle of the Brazilian jungle is like, or your car is locked up. Do you want water? Do you want food? He's like, nah, I got a bottle of wine and I got some snacks. I'm good. And this guy was just so jolly and happy and adventurous. And that's what I mean by the French people we've met traveling with kids in the middle of the jungle, like no big deal. And so we left him and I felt bad because I was like, well, all right, if you don't want to ride,
but we also knew there were, like we had said, occasionally, at least 3 times a day, someone comes by. So like you're not just left out in the middle of nowhere.
But I also knew the guy was right, actually. The more we traveled, the more I started to have sort of his sort of outlook of like, it'll be fine. Unless you're truly destitute, he's like, I've got water, I've got some food, I've got some wine. I'm good for like 3 or 4 days.
Stop, yeah.
And this road, the Transpantaneira, this isn't remote like the other ones we've been mentioning in this video. It's remote, but it's like there's got to be at least 7 to 10 trucks a day. Maybe sometimes in busy season there's way more than that. But I would say when we were there, you see at least 7 or 8 vehicles a day. Yeah. And I think mostly when it rains, there's less because they literally just won't go. They'll wait. And so if it's raining, the delivery truck that might bring food or whatever down to the village, it just doesn't run. Yeah. So if you're stuck, it might seem scary, but like this guy knew, even though he's from France, he's like, I'll be fine. I'll wait a day. It's like, okay. Yeah. So that was an amazing one. And just what we got to see. And then we go to a guy's property who's got a pool and he's got this big tower that was super rickety. The whole tower was moving.
Yeah, that was really scary. Like you walked up there and you were like, oh,
Yeah, and it was one of the rare occasions we paid to camp somewhere, but it was so worth it because we parked next to this pool.
We were exhausted and we were muddy.
Muddy, and so for the next 2.5 to 3 hours, we scrubbed our muck boots, our Max Tracks, and we are just trying to get the mud off of everything that got muddy. And not the trucks, though. We weren't cleaning the trucks. That was no point in that. We saved that for later. But it was just amazing. We're hanging out with our friends. We just got to see all these crazy animals.
And he had a herd of, like, water buffalo. Yeah. Which were out there all over the place. But he had a herd of water buffalo. And he was like, because there was a pool. And he said, don't leave the gate open to the pool because they'll come in and get in the pool. And we're like, really? That's crazy. And there were parrots there. Like, it was a really cool property. And he was super nice. But it was just such a relief to get to, like, by that time the mud had lessened on the road. So you're like, okay, we're for sure getting out of here. The mud is not like a stressor anymore. And
The
like,
work part was behind you.
yeah,
Like in all these adventures, you'll see, we can speak about them like highly now. And in the moment, they still were fun, but they were more fun once you sort of crested that point of,
yeah,
all right, we're going to make it.
yeah,
We've got the fuel to make it to wherever.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got through the worst of the mud.
yeah.
Okay, we've already made the turnaround at the top of the mountain. Whatever it was, it
Yeah.
was like,
And then
okay,
I think that
let's go.
place had an outdoor kitchen like right next to the pool, which was cool. So we all like made dinner together in the little outdoor kitchen and like relived our crazy day. And yeah, that was a really, I don't know, special experience for sure.
it was cool. I mean, and after that, after a few more fun side trips, that's where those friends we were traveling with headed north. And, you know, the fellow Arizonans we had run into were heading back north towards Arizona.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were heading south down to Ushuaia. So that was definitely a cool one.
Yeah. So that's, I think, the end of those ones for now. We have lots of memories. So if you like this, let us know. Comment below if you like us kind of.
Or
thinking-
ask a topic too,
Yeah.
because we just kind of came up with this one, just certain trails or spots that stood out.
We were
for their-
reminiscing about a few of them yesterday, and we are like, you know, that would probably be a fun video to share. You know, we have tons of all this footage, and like it's a good story, I think. So
Yeah, totally. And I think when we make the videos, especially when we were down there, we are hustling. We are living out of a truck, which is full time. We're trying to get the next, you know, border crossing done. We're looking for Wi-Fi in the middle of nowhere and buying SIM cards.
hard.
And
Starlink is a game
when those videos came out, I don't think we always gave or had the time to give the
No.
background.
Oh,
so
for sure.
if you have a question about something specific,
Yeah.
or throw a few topics below, because I don't know, give us a
Yeah, these are fun for us to do because it's fun to remember all of these memories and
totally.
share them with you. Because yeah, it's pretty cool.
All right, so thanks for coming along.
Yes.
Let us know what the next top 5 should be, and
Yeah.
we'll do that for you. So we appreciate you watching our videos, and thanks for all the likes, comments, subscriptions, patrons, etc. All of it keeps us going.
Yeah.
And we can't wait soon to show you what the next big adventure is going to
Yeah.
be. We're really excited, but for now, it's back to work for us.
Yeah. Thanks for watching us eat.
See ya.
Bye.
Speaking of eating. Whoa.
Oh God. Oh God.
Look at that.
Hello, dreamer. You've been dreaming for so long. Now you're waking. You're still waiting for the sun to come along.